Good morning, everybody. Welcome. You're lucky today because I presented this yesterday, so you get the better version today because I'm going to work on the cracks, shall we call. So my name's Kelly. I work for ADHD. Oops, sorry, I'm going to go slower. I started really quick, didn't I? I work for ADHD Norfolk, Different Minds UK. I am a psychotherapist, ADHD coach and educator. We work with people from age 5 up until the beautiful ages a bit older than that, so and children into adulthood. We do coaching, screening, diagnosis and offer support where possible. So we're going to do a slightly different talk today rather than the basic what is ADHD. We're going to be looking at the neuroscience of ADHD, so actually what happens inside the brain and the body of somebody who has ADHD. So ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder that causes a difference in brain growth, development and function. The differences of the ADHD brain can affect our thinking, behaviour and our emotions. Understanding the science of ADHD can help improve quality of life and academic performance of children with ADHD. So in my coaching experience, I've found that actually knowing you've got ADHD is one thing. For me, it was very validating getting that diagnosis at 31 after multiple misdiagnosis. But actually understanding what's happening inside of my brain and my body and that of my 3 children helps us to create different strategies, more understanding of the reasons why we behave how we behave. It helped me to understand it wasn't a flaw in my personality or me as a human being, but actually in the way that my brain delivers signals around my body, which affect the fact that my attention can be scattered, my behaviour can be very up and down, and my emotions can be a little bit all over the place. So how is the ADHD brain different? It's different in its development, its structure, and its function. So when we talk about development, we're talking about the way the brain matures. In the structure, we're talking about the size of the brain, and in function, we're talking about the way that the chemicals and the neurotransmitters move across different pathways in the brain. So research reported that people with ADHD had a smaller brain volume, so the overall size of their brain and their subcortical areas. These differences are greater in children and lesser in adulthood, so they do catch up. So research has reported that parts of the ADHD brain mature at a slower pace. So we can see the immaturity in some people with ADHD, but like all parts of ADHD, it differs across each individual. We can have ADHD, I can have it, you have it, other people have it, but it's all different. It's across a spectrum. No 2 people with ADHD are the same. 2 key parts of the brain that they found severe differences in are the amygdala and the hippocampus, and they're actually responsible for our emotional processing and our impulsivity. So whether that's verbal impulsivity or our actions and behaviours. So in the function, research has shown that ADHD involves changes in the blood flow to certain parts of the brain, including the prefrontal cortex, which is this area just behind the forehead just here. Because of the reduced blood flow, there's less activity in those parts of the brain. So the brain can be divided into sections called lobes. The frontal lobe, so the brain, oh, hold on. There's always one. So, there we go. The frontal lobe, as I said, is the part just behind your forehead, just here. And the occipital lobe is at the back there. So the frontal lobe is the main part of the brain that's affected with ADHD, and this is the part of the brain that helps people to organise, plan, pay attention and make decisions. These are also known as your executive functions. So your executive functions are your life skills. We're going to come onto a sheet in a minute which will break it down a little bit more, but this is your day-to-day, getting up, getting going, knowing what to do, in what order and so on. So processing, I explain to a lot of my clients that we process the world in a different kind of way. And this is because of the difference in the connections in our prefrontal cortex and our visual processing area. Now the definition of ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but I would argue that we don't have a deficit of attention. We have too much attention on too many things all at once. We struggle to know what's more important than something else. And we just feel everything that's going on around us. The way we process the world is completely different. So networks. Researchers have identified several major networks that are different than those with ADHD. And these are the networks that are involved in reward, focus, planning, attention shifting between tasks, and our movement. So signals, the brain signals we get from our visual stimuli, from auditory stimuli, the signals we receive are different from that of a neurotypical person. And the reason for this is a difference in our neurotransmitters. So dopamine and norepinephrine are two neurotransmitters that play a vital role in ADHD. They're the ones that help us with our executive function. And it's been shown that we have a significant difference in the amount of neurotransmitters that we have in our brains. So I'm going to skip through to the next bit, which says difference in lobes and difference in receptors. That's differences in two key functions in the brain, which affect executive function, kind of explain why people with ADHD have these difficulties. So these are some of our executive functions. Number 1 being impulse control. Number 2 being planning and prioritising. 3 is self-monitoring. 4 is working memory, so remembering the information we've learned in previous lessons or the mistakes that we made yesterday, remembering them the next day. Task initiation, so getting yourself going, getting up, getting motivated, knowing what to do. Flexible thinking, so that ability to think kind of differently. We have a lot of rigid thinking in ADHD and across the spectrum. Our emotional control. Now, with emotional control, the things that people with ADHD experience, the things that they feel are real. It's the fact that they don't regulate their emotions that's the difference between them and a neurotypical person. It's normal to feel the way they feel about certain things, but the fact that the reactions are so extreme is the difference between us and that of a neurotypical person. And it comes back to those neural pathways. Number 8 is goal setting. So I'm going to show you in pictures to make it make a bit more sense, because I know science can be a little bit complicated with all these different words. But what you can see on the screen there is a synapse in the brain of a neurotypical person. And in the middle there is all of those neurotransmitters that are required to help somebody pay attention, regulate their behaviour and manage their emotions. So this neurotypical person experiences life a lot more linear because of the amount of neurochemicals that are going on in their brains. So as I said, they can regulate their attention, their behaviour and their emotions. And then we move on to that of somebody with ADHD. Now, if I was drawing this on my board at work, I would be drawing my little mushrooms and the chemicals in between. And I would say, if I said to the neurotypical child, go upstairs, get your socks, come back down, we're going to school, they would go upstairs, get their socks and come back down. If you said to this child here, one of my 3, go and get your socks and come back, an hour later, they still wouldn't be back. I'd go into their bedroom, they would be sat on the floor, probably still not dressed, playing with something that they shouldn't be playing with, and then all the stress begins to start. Because of the lack of neurochemicals they have, they probably weren't paying attention to me when I said, it's time to get up, go to school, go get your socks. They struggle to regulate their behaviour. And because their brain is chronically understimulated, it's lacking the chemicals it needs for those executive functions to know, I need to get my socks because then I need to get my teeth brushed. I need to get out the door on time because we've got to go to school. They're your executive functions. They're the things that help you plan forward. So it's not just because they don't want to go to school, possibly that plays a part in it, but actually the neurochemicals aren't helping either. But there are ways we can increase the neurotransmitters that are in an ADHD child or adult's brain, and knowing them can be the difference between a good morning and a bad morning. So we're going to go on to those now, which number 1 is interest. When a child is interested in what they're doing, their brain, their reward circuitry activates, they get lots and lots of dopamine, and they're more likely to pay attention, manage their behaviour, and regulate their emotions. Now, I do find this a bit of a tricky one because ADHD is an interest-based personality. All the children that I work with will say to me when I ask them, what's your concentration like? Well, it's better when I'm interested. Well, that sounds like a choice, but it's not a choice. What actually happens is the brain releases the chemicals they need to regulate their emotions, their behaviour, and their attention when they're interested because their reward circuitry was born differently. They can't pay attention in things that are boring to them or uninteresting because they live with a chronically understimulated prefrontal cortex. So adding a child's interest into things that you need them to do can help them to regulate themselves and pay attention. And we can trick our brains with this one just by talking about the things that we're interested in to get some activity going. So the next one is reward. It's not long-term rewards because that's an executive function. You know, if you behave for 6 weeks, you can have this reward at the end of it. It's more immediate rewards. If you can get this done, this can happen. I often give the example of my daughter tidying her bedroom. She's 14, that's a huge executive function. We see so many steps to that activity, so she will just look at it and shut down. Her executive function skills don't say, let's just do this bit, then this bit, then this bit, maybe socks, then toys, then something else. She just sees one huge job and cannot see it through because of the lack of neurotransmitters she's got. So what we tend to do sometimes, you know, here's £10, will you tidy your bedroom? She gets it done. And again, this looks like a choice, but she's really motivated by money. It could also be seeing her friends. It could be by a meal that she really, really likes. Whatever activity at the time is creating dopamine can be really well used to get things done that are particularly challenging if you have executive function difficulties, which for me is, you know, housework. Next one, urgency. So we often see everything being last minute. Me getting here today, for example, arrived about 10 minutes ago because my attention was scattered this morning. My emotions were dysregulated because I didn't sleep very well worrying about today. There was a lot going on in my mind, but when urgency kicked in, we got here and everything got sorted. But also with this one, it can be having something like 6 weeks to do a project. It's likely that I'm going to do it at 5 weeks, 6 days and 20 hours before the project is due because of my executive function challenges. I could have a whole day to complete this project, but not have the executive function skills to get it done because that involves, well, what information do I need? Where do I need to recall the information in my brain from? What resources do I need? A chronically understimulated brain will just run from it. I'll find anything else more interesting to do than that task because I struggle with the executive function skills to get things done unless there's one of these things involved. So when the urgency kicks in after the 5 weeks and 6 days and 20 hours, my brain fills with dopamine and norepinephrine because of the urgency and I can get it done. But doing that across all of my school projects ends up being exhausting, leaving everything to the last minute. It works and I can get it done and I can probably get it done to the level of my neurotypical peers, but there has to be this horrible sense of urgency to complete things that are involved with executive function. The next one being novelty. So this can be friends, foods, clothes, events. We often hear children with ADHD are too much, they're too over the top with their new friends, but when the novelty of the new friend comes, their brain is so overstimulated, it's all they can think about. They are the biggest and most rewarding thing ever to this young person because novelty really, really activates the prefrontal cortex. So for me, it can also be with hobbies, so I can get an idea that I want to do something new and it's all I can think about, and then I buy everything that's involved with it. But once the novelty has hit and I've got the thing, it just drops off because my brain has had the reward and now it needs something else because it's not stimulated on a linear level. And the next one being competition. We see lots of people with ADHD really driven by competition. If you said to me, I bet you can't do this, watch me, bet I can. At university recently, we had a multiple choice question on the brain and the different parts of the brain we needed, and I instantly felt a sense of dread. I just wanted to run. My eyes were full of tears because there was no way I had the executive function skills and the recall to pull back all those different lessons. But on the next slide, they added a competition. So out of the 300 people that I'm studying developmental psychology with, who are all much, much younger than me, I was the winner on the top of the board because when they added competition in, it wasn't that I instantly remembered everything, but I quickly found ways to find the answers in the time frame and just felt like the best version of myself. So competition releases a lot of dopamine into the ADHD brain, into the reward circuitries, and helps us do those things that neurotypical people take for granted. To show it in a picture, here we go again. When we add in these 5 different things, we see more activation in the prefrontal cortex of the brain of somebody with ADHD, which helps them then to regulate their attention, manage their behaviour and manage their emotions. There's not many children, I say, that I speak to that don't tell me their concentration is much better when they're interested, which can kind of make us look a little bit selfish because we like talking about ourselves, we like talking about our interests, but actually it's because we can pay more attention when we're doing it. And sometimes we can butt in if you're talking about something you're interested in because we can feel ourselves starting to lose focus, or maybe because we're trying to relate to you. So we add in things about ourselves to keep the conversation going. So treatments for ADHD, treatments for the brain. Stimulant medications and non-stimulant medications, any kind of pharmaceutical treatment for ADHD works by altering those levels of neurotransmitters. So it's not just that we have a lack of these neurotransmitters, it's that they don't stay in the brain for long enough either. So the chemicals are basically designed to help us sustain the levels that we have for longer periods of time. But there are natural ways to increase the levels of dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin in the brain, including diet, exercise, learning through interests, cuddles, lots of different ways. It doesn't all just have to be about medication. So behaviour strategies, developing the executive function skills, we may struggle with them, but we can learn them, and that's the most important thing. We can't just avoid doing things all of the time. We can work on these things if we can identify which executive function skills we struggle with the most. When we've identified the most significant challenges in our executive function, we can then structure our environment to support them. So the best support that we find is a multimodal approach. So it's not just one thing. We see lots of people come to clinic that just want medication because they think it's going to be the magic cure to ADHD, and it really isn't. The key for me is the understanding of the condition, understanding the things that I struggle with the most, that my children struggle with the most, and then putting things in place to support them with that. But if they have an understanding of the reasons why they struggle with what they do, it protects their self-esteem and their self-worth going forward. When my daughter's reprimanded for doodling, for chewing, for moving around, she knows it's because her central nervous system is understimulated and she knows she can do something about it. She can take responsibility if she knows the reasons why she's behaving the way she's behaving. Whether she does or not is a different thing because she's a teenager, but she will. So to recap, the brain of somebody with ADHD is slightly smaller. There's fewer connections that go on in the brain. So the ADHD brain is chronically understimulated, and it will look for anything more interesting than certain things that it's supposed to be doing. Our brains don't have the neural organisation to self-regulate. So 1 minute we're up, 1 minute we could be down, 1 minute something can send us over the edge. And it's because of the differences in our brain. It's not because of poor parenting or too much sugar or anything like that. It's because of neurobiological brain differences. ADHD is not a behavioural condition. It's not a mental health condition or a learning difficulty. It is a neurobiological brain difference, and it's really important, I think, to know that. When you're diagnosed with other things, maybe diabetes, you're told about what happens inside your body, what you need to do to make it feel better, you know, have your insulin, and I don't really know too much about it, but that was my example. But with ADHD, when you are behaving too much or not paying enough attention, you're often reprimanded for it. Whereas actually the question should be, what do you need? I need some neurotransmitters. I need some dopamine because the biggest organ in my body isn't working effectively. But because we can't see it, it's not treated in the same manner. But if we can get, as I said, the children to understand and adults to understand, if we've lost focus, if we're feeling overly emotional, what do we need? Well, we need some neurotransmitters, and how do you get them? So that's what we do through our coaching processes, is help people get to understand themselves, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and what strategies we can implement to help them with the executive function challenges that they face. So that is kind of it. I've gone a bit early today because we had a lot of questions yesterday. Does anybody have anything they would like to ask? Nobody's going to ask any questions today, are they? Hi.
I just wanted to know, when dopamine is actually released, what is the lasting effect of that particular quantity of dopamine, whether it be from medication or whether it be from a reward? I know it would vary from person to person, but in terms of the duration of how long dopamine lasts as an effect in terms of its power over Making us feel better? Or is that a little bit
Oh, that's a really hard question because there's so many different variations of dopamine. Like we have our cheap dopamine, so if I feel myself rushing for chocolate or sweets or a sugary energy drink and I have something like that, that's that cheap dopamine that will drop straight out, which again is great with my teenager, that when she's looking for something risky, I'm telling her that's just a quick fix and it will make you feel better, but it won't last. And that's where we see getting in some really good aerobic exercise, making sure there are lots of things that we're interested going on in our lives so the dopamine remains more consistent. But it's understanding that I have clients who will say, well, my children will only eat pot noodles at the minute and that's all they'll eat, and then they fill their cupboard up with it, and then the next minute they'll never touch a pot noodle again ever in their life. Well, the dopamine has hit its limit. And the sad part of that also is that when we see so much drug abuse and substance abuse in somebody with ADHD, if you grow up with a chronically understimulated brain, I've gone all goosebumpy now, and you don't know why you behave the way that you behave or why you feel these intense emotions, and you're told you're too sensitive, you're too emotional, you will look for anything to feel better. And craving dopamine as an adult, you know, we're only going to hit those levels of feeling better through spending, gambling, risky behaviour. So finding out early is really, really key, and finding what makes you feel better, which unfortunately in, you know, traditional education today, it's very difficult to implement it. But I really feel that by empowering the children to understand what's happening in their bodies and know it's not actually a fault in them, what's going on with them, enables them to self-advocate and say, look, I need to get out of here for a moment because I'm feeling this particular way. And that's what we do through the clinic, through coaching. We've just taken on a coach to work in schools, teaching children to work through physical activity and sport to teach them about their brains, because we often find we see the schools reach out to us. You know, I've got a child with ADHD who's struggling. They don't want to sit down and be coached. You know, this is what's happening, this is this, this is that. So we take them out, find out what their interests are, whether it's boxing, we haven't tried skateboarding or anything like that yet, or football, whatever it is, and take them out of the environment, do something they're interested in and start teaching them about themselves, ways to self-regulate, talk to them about their strengths and their weaknesses, and start to empower them to work with their brain rather than against it. And I know I went way off your question there, but has anybody else got one? Hello.
Can you talk about serotonin?
I can talk about it in as much as it is another key part of the ADHD brain and the ADHD structures. And we know that serotonin and dopamine are your happy chemicals. They're your feel-good chemicals, but they're also the chemicals that do drive those executive function skills. So I can't tell you too much more about where you get it from because it's a slightly different set of neurotransmitters. But I know that a lot of the serotonin is built in the gut. And I know that a lot of people with ADHD struggle with food regulation because of our impulsivity, because of the differences in the way that we process. For me, I don't really process hunger or thirst at all because I'm so busy with so many other things going on in my head that I miss those signals. So I'm very dysregulated in eating. So I know that I don't produce a lot of serotonin because of my dysregulated eating and my very poor diet. So the challenges of ADHD go so much further away from behaviour when they go into gut difficulties, and serotonin's function and the gut is massive. But I think that would be a whole other slide. We are working with a nutritionist at the moment to try and really understand a little bit more about that process of serotonin being built in the gut, dysregulated eating or limited eating with ADHD, if we have sensory difficulties, really affects the production of serotonin. But it's not particularly my area of speciality. Sorry. Hi.
How is it diagnosed? Is there a test or is it?
Yeah, so ADHD is diagnosed in a sort of multimodal approach of collecting information. So we collect information from schools, from families, early developmental history, and then we have screening tools that we use in clinic to basically work out if ADHD is present. Has it been present in the child or the person since before they were 12? And we look at the medical side of things. So we use a whole team of people, from a psychiatrist to clinical psychologists to educational psychologists. We work together to create an overall approach because the behaviours of ADHD do look like a lot of other conditions. So they can sometimes look like autism. So I was misdiagnosed until I was 31. So I was diagnosed with OCD, depression, anxiety. They looked at bipolar, borderline personality disorder, all these other things. And they all look like ADHD at different times in the life. But I tried lots of different medications, lots of different therapies, lots of different approaches, and still felt that something was amiss. And when I stumbled across this ADHD diagnosis, it kind of made lots of things make sense. And that's why it's such a rounded process, because it's really important to get it right. Hi.
Is it me?
Yeah, yes, it's you.
Is it the case that there is a lot of weighted evidence now then that there is genetics? There's a lot of ADHD in my family.
Oh, massively.
And this really resonated with me. So I'm diagnosed OCD, but now I'm questioning that.
Yeah, I question it, all of it. Yesterday after the talk, I had a couple of ladies speak to me saying, I've been diagnosed with bipolar, and that was one that was really pushed on me. And I said, no, it doesn't fit. But I understand why I don't look like the typical presentation of ADHD. But yes, we know it's predominantly genetic, and it's probably one of my favourite parts about screening people for ADHD is that when we're screening a child, you can look at one of the parents and I can spot it straight away. And we ask the question at the end, so is there any ADHD in the family? No, no. Do you think you have any neurodiverse behaviours? No. All right. And again, because of the way that I struggle to not show exactly what I'm feeling in those seconds, I have to try really hard to hold it in. And sometimes it just falls out of, yeah, all right then. But I think that's, why I do quite well within the role that I'm in because of the relatability. But yeah, when I was diagnosed at 31, my mum's 3 marriages, 17 houses, real difficulties with food shopping and cooking, etc., all made sense. But generationally, you wouldn't have picked it out there. Whereas now we know, and yeah, it definitely comes in a bit of a line. And maybe it's worth having a conversation. We can have a little look at it. But again, the OCD can be a comorbidity of unmanaged ADHD, but it's those internal, relentless, restless thoughts that look like OCD, don't they? So when I went to the doctors and said, I just can't stop thinking about this and this and this and this and this, my brain never stops. Well, it looks like anxiety. It looks like OCD. But my question always was, but why? But why? Every therapist I spoke to at the end of it, but how do I live better? Oh, I don't know. But having childhood trauma, I don't know, parents splitting up, being bullied, etc., could give reason for anxiety and for OCD or for this and that. It all kind of is so hard to unpick, and that's why, again, back to your question, we have to look at it from so many different angles and look for family history. We look for just history within the person. People say all the time, everyone's got ADHD, everyone's got a bit of this, bit of that, bit of the other, but really is it every single day there's something else that's going on with these executive function challenges? Anybody else? Hi.
What would you recommend? So everything you're saying really resonates with me. I've been on antidepressants since I was 13 and
Yeah.
been diagnosed with BPD and bipolar and everything throughout sort of my life. And now I'm 32. What would you recommend is the process for trying to see if...
Look for a screening, I would say. You can. I've left cards and leaflets all outside. We are a private clinic. I'm not pushing you to screen through us, but look for information so I can send you details of places that you can go. We're looking at NHS waiting lists, sort of 3 to 5 years at the moment for screening, but it may be worth investigating it and having a look at the tools that we use to look actually, is it, I don't know if it was BPD they said or what it is, but yeah, talk to me.
I feel like it's just been everything.
Yeah.
I got an award at school for procrastinator of the year.
Yeah.
Last minute. Like,
This is it. It's when the penny drops and you hear what ADHD actually is, it's fascinating. But we do have a societal thing of, when the lady said to me, you've got ADHD, I remember saying, I'm not a boy. Somebody would have picked this up by now. I'm not this, I'm not that. But within maybe 2 weeks, my whole life changed. Just the understanding of myself. I'm not too emotional. I'm not too sensitive. Yes, I am scattered and all over the place, but what are the things I'm really good at? And the last few years have been based rebuilding myself on that. But yeah, come talk about a screening and even just look at it on the internet. And if it starts to really make sense, just pursue it with everything you've got. Because you don't need a diagnosis to start living as your authentic self. You just have to really understand who you are and why you do what you do so you can make the appropriate changes. Don't try and be somebody that you're not. Hi.
Hi, I've just heard of ADHD Norfolk today, so I don't want to take away from what you guys do, but you mentioned about the natural approaches of diet and exercise.
Yeah.
Are there
Yeah, definitely. If you take my card, there's lots of different suggestions that we can have, because I say diagnosis and medication isn't necessarily the answer, it's the lifestyle changes. I know if I get up and exercised every day, I'd be much better at managing life, but I struggle with the motivation to do it because I don't sleep very well. These are all the extra challenges of ADHD that come in. So you need a good support team around you to help get these other things in place, but there's definitely lots of support if you know where to look, which is why the lady before, I don't know if anybody was in here, has created something called, I hope I get it right, is it the Send directory? Send Unlocked? Send Unlocked, it's an app, it's now available on the Apple Store, and what she's looking to do is find ways to bring resources together for people to find it, because one of the things is finding out you've got ADHD, but then what? Then where do I go? Where do I look? Who's the best thing for me? And it sounds like what she's done, it's giving me goosebumps again, is incredible, because what you'll notice out of everybody that's here today and the lady that's running this is we're all neurodiverse. But hold on, I thought neurodiverse people didn't have empathy and only cared about themselves and lived in this different world. No, it's not the case. So yeah, Send Unlocked it's called. But speak to me too, my card's outside. Hi.
Can you tell us what you feel the benefits of having ADHD might be? And I'll give you a bit of something nice. I'm a careers advisor.
Yeah.
So I come across people, young children and teenagers with this diagnosis, and I invariably find them quite charismatic.
Yes.
They're very engaging.
Absolutely. So I was recently also diagnosed with dyslexia and dyscalculia at 35, which was amazing. And I said to the man, right, so how do I study at university with this? And he's like, well, find out what's best for you. He said quite clearly, you're very good at talking. You talk well, you're very expressionate. You know, you've done some incredible things with your life. You just can't do admin and, you know, organisation, etc. But I think something that would be really good for your students is to show them the people with ADHD that have done incredible things. People with ADHD are very creative. We think outside the box. We have got lots and lots of energy. So we talked about some of them yesterday. Michael Jordan has ADHD. Elon Musk, I know not everyone loves him, but he has. Look at him changing the world. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. There's people within every sector that have ADHD, and showing younger people images of these people is really inspiring. Because the thing that they have different to a neurotypical person is just this relentless determination to keep going, to see the world differently, to achieve different levels. And I would argue, I'm sorry to anyone neurotypical in here, but that it's neurodiverse people that change the world. Because we think so much, we are so relentless in what we do and what we believe in, that when you harness your passion by knowing what you're good at and stop worrying about the things you're not good at, housework, food shopping, you know, pay the bills, and focus on the things you're good at, amazing things happen. You know, my role within the organisation came from looking at all the things that I'd messed up at. I was employed by Kelly Services 3 times to go to Norwich Union and sacked 3 times because I'm not good when I'm micromanaged. I do come up with different ideas. I don't like following the rules. So I would never, if I'd have known I had ADHD, go into one of those roles where I was in a kind of call centre or in an office or somewhere that I shouldn't be. It's about knowing yourself and what you are good at, and it will be probably verbal presentations. It will be seeing things differently, being creative. It won't be numbers and admin and the same thing every day. It will be something with variety. But I'd be more than happy to talk to you afterwards. We've been to a few careers places recently to give them some strategies on how to engage with people with ADHD, because often the idea of going into employment is so scary because school has been so hard and education has been so hard. But there's a lot of great careers out there for people with ADHD. Hi.
Sorry, I had another
You
question.
again.
Just on the work subject.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who, she's not officially been diagnosed with ADHD, but is in the process of getting a diagnosis, and because the NHS waitlist is so long. And she is very neurodiverse, and she's been in a job for several years, and she finds it helpful because she's got sensory issues to wear like ear loops and things.
Yeah.
The work has said that she's not allowed to because she's not present in the workplace.
Oh my days.
So they're not being very supportive.
I'm feeling rage rising through my body right now.
So they said, oh, we'll make a compromise, we'll move you to a different part of the office.
Oh yeah, sit you on your own over there.
Yeah, sit your own. But then they said no because she's by herself over there, and they don't feel like she's part of the team. So they've brought her back, sitting her next to like an Alexa her playing music. So she can't concentrate, and then they reprimand her when she can't focus and do all the tasks that she's supposed to do.
She's in the wrong workplace.
I mean, this is what I think as well, but I mean, what do you recommend for like workplaces to better support? Like, are there things out there for management?
Oh, this one's so hard. There are so many things out there, and there's so many people that can go into organisations and teach them about ways to support their staff, but whether they listen and action is a whole other thing.
That's one thing, but it's just something for her to maybe bring to her management and say, like, there's a free tutorial or something. I know like wellbeing service do free sessions for workplaces on like managing your mental health. I didn't know if there was something similar.
Yeah, there's probably some resources. There's some links to certain website and lists of things that people can do to help that she can take in. And it's just really sad that she's going to have to wait to get an official piece of paper to hold people to account to say, these are my needs. Whereas if she had have identified this earlier, she may well have not gone into that role or gone in with the power to say, no, actually, I'm wearing these because I need to. And if you want me to be my best productive self, then you need to make accommodations. But she probably doesn't have that sense of self and the confidence to do it because she's grown up not knowing she was neurodiverse. But yeah, I want to help her. And I'll probably blow up the business, so don't tell me who it is. Hello.
It's actually to help this lady, your friend, if she contacts Access to Work, you don't need a diagnosis to be able to access workplace mentoring and coaching. I'm sure they'll be able to help her have a dialogue with her employer.
Yeah, if she can prove that she's in a waiting list for that, she can also access pots of money to get perhaps coaching for understanding her neurodiversity and build her self-confidence so she can power into that workplace as a neurodiverse person, knowing the impact she has. Yeah, that's a good shout. Well done. I think I'll probably have to move on quickly because I'll get kicked out. Yep.
So I've just got one question.
Yeah.
So, my son has been excluded from school this week. We're about to get a private diagnosis for, I don't know, but we're looking at ODD and ADHD.
Yeah.
He is seeking that dopamine release from iPads at school.
Yeah.
How do you reverse that and put it into something positive? Like when his brain is telling him he needs to search for that, but then it's triggering, obviously the ODD.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that dopamine search?
Yeah, iPads and technology are really difficult. We see this a lot actually with parents that go, well, they can just spend hours and hours and hours on them. But if we go back to my point that our attention is so scattered all day long, we're in tune to everything. Everything is so loud that when we find a screen and something we like and it takes us straight into there and we're nowhere else at all, it feels like heaven. So you can see why he's craving it. But yeah, it's not good to be on it all the time. So for that one, I don't think the iPad's the problem. I think there's other problems that are making him want to go to that iPad. And I think that addressing what's happening around him and enabling him to regulate more throughout the day would make him less likely to go for that. I think that's quite a complicated one. It'd probably be worth having a chat about to say, actually, maybe it is oppositional defiance or maybe it's pathological demand avoidance, that he just cannot cope with anything else at all and he needs that one thing that he's become attached to for safety and security. It could be a lot more complex than just wanting an iPad.
It doesn't seem, it's that search like for it, but then it's triggering behaviours.
Yeah.
You know, how you can sort of like reverse that mindset.
Yeah, with I think a collaborative approach to looking at actually what's going on and talking to him about what he's feeling, and setting some kind of boundaries out of what's expected and what's not. But I think understanding and validating what he's feeling will come first. There's obviously a lot going on there, so it might be worth having a conversation after and picking it apart a little bit because it sounds quite complex. Simple but complex. And this is the trouble, that behind every big emotion and every big behaviour and every really difficult thing is an unmet need. But it's just enabling the child or the adult to be able to say, this is what's going on, but that's an executive function skill. It's hard, we need support. I'm getting totally kicked out now, right? I'm so sorry. But my cards are on the table outside, so if anybody does want to have a conversation after this, please take my details.